welcome back to another episode of Wicked Darkness. I'm Kathy, I'm your host, and with me tonight I have Kevin.
Good evening, good day, good morning. Hello.
I have Mika.
Well, Matt.
And I have Debbie.
Hi.
And I have Renee.
Hello.
Welcome back, guys.
Whoop, whoop.
So, I guess we should talk about a disclaimer. No negative talk. No, I shouldn't say negative. No disrespect during this podcast. Because the entity that we'll be discussing seems to be kind of easily offended and can cause some issues in your life if we deviate that direction, I guess. So without further ado, we're going to be talking about someplace known as Key West. It's an island in Florida in the United States. And there is a local resident down there by the name of Robert the Doll. Robert he's been around for over 100 years now. And I thought it was time to finally give him some props and talk about him. What do you guys know about Robert?
I know that, the young boy that was Robert living with his artist dealer parents was a fairly lonely and awkward kid. Believe his aunt, while in England, happened to see this doll in a storefront window. He was a display and thought, oh, that's pretty close to a life-size doll. That would be a good companion for my nephew. Bought the doll, had it shipped over to the United States. Robert sort of really fell in, I would say, sort of love with it because it was near his size and could kind of identify, and it was sort of his friend for his entire life. He was away from him for a while and then came back. There's certainly a lot more to that story, but yeah, I know a fair bit of detail about him, but yeah, Robert named the doll after him.
Exactly. So we're talking about Robert Eugene Otto, and he was the owner of Robert the Doll, and he ended up giving Robert his name, literally. All the way up until he got the doll, his name was Robert, and he went by Robert with his family, and then the doll came as a gift, and he told his family, I am Gene. Call me Gene. They're like, no, your name is Robert. No, I gave him that name. That is now his name. So after that, Gene was Gene and Robert was Robert, and there was no Robert Gene. It was two separate entities. We'll go back to, do you guys know a little bit of the history of the family at all? Of the Otto family?
I just know his parents were art dealers and art collectors, very eccentric people. Didn't really like Robert Gene touching things in the house, so it was a very strict upbringing, and he was kind of second to their art business.
Well, so I'll give you a little genealogy of the Otto family. So there was, I got to go and get my handy little Robert the Doll book. Yes, I have a Robert the Doll book. So Gene's grandparents, their names were Dr. Joseph Otto and Maria Belton Otto. And Joseph was originally from Germany, and he was part of East Persia. That's where he came from. He was born July 10th, 1826, and he had actually a noble lineage. He is traced back to the Otto the Great of Persia. So they were royal, it sounds like. He left his homeland, though, during a student revolution, escaped to London in a load of hay. And then he was assisted by a 12-year-old girl who was stuck hanging on a picket fence by her petticoat. So he assisted her. She was stuck on this fence. I don't know why she was stuck on the fence trying to jump it or what, but he helped her. And then 6 years later, she turned into Mrs. Otto, and became the doctor's wife at the age of 18. And then Joseph and Maria ended up having Thomas Osgood Otto, who is also a doctor, and Minnie Elizabeth Watkins. They were Jean's parents. So Thomas was born in 1865. Minnie was born in 1868. And they had they had 4 children. Jean was the youngest, and he was born in 1900, and he had an older sister. I'm probably gonna kill this name. Mispa, something like that. Otto. She was born in 1892. Then there's Joseph III. He was born in 1895. And then there's Dr. Thomas Osgood, Jr., who was born in 1897. So he was pretty much by himself because all his siblings were pretty close to age, and then he came along. And they're all buried in Key West, except for Joseph Otto III. He's not buried there, but the rest of the family is all buried in Key West. And we'll talk about Robert, or I should say Eugene, and his family that he created later on. But they're, like I said, they're all buried at the cemetery, including their little beloved Yorkshire Terrier, Sonny Otto, is buried at the foot of Jean's burial site. So that's like a little insight to them. They did have some help around the house. Jean's mother was actually from the Bahamas, but his father was from Key West. And Gene was unique. Like I said, he was the only child by himself because the other 3 all hung out together and were a little bit older than him. Not a lot older, but enough that he was just like the outsider. So, you can actually visit Robert the doll, and you can visit the family, and you can visit the home of Jean, or the Otto family. Let's back up to when Jean was around a toddler age. You had said, Kevin, that he ended up getting a gift, this doll. Robert would become part of the family. How much do you guys know about Robert the doll, period? Do you guys know any history of Robert or anything about Robert?
Wasn't he made by a German doll maker? Steel, I think, was their last name.
Steve,
Steve, thank you.
Stiff, yeah, Steve Company.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I thought that's where they acquired him, was in Germany, not in England.
Yep, you're right.
Okay.
Yeah. With that, Robert throughout the years has been worked on. And when Jean had Robert as a playmate, they assumed he ended up with a torn ear. That was the one ear it was the ear that the Steve company ended up putting a button inside the ear. It was a metal button with their name on it. And that was like their trademark of all their creations. They all had that little button. And unfortunately, his is missing. But they were able to look back through the records and see that they did, because Steve is known as the makers of teddy bears.
Yep.
Teddy bears came around the 1900s, about 1902. And when they made the teddy bear, it was a big seller, obviously, but they also made these little characters, these little guys, and Robert being one of them. And you had said that he was like a type that you would put in the window as a display because he's quite large. In fact, do you guys know? Here, I'll give you the dynamics of all of his. Okay, so he is, I should say, he is 40.25 inches tall. He weighs 6 pounds. His head is lengthwise is 8.5 inches. His head width is 6.5 inches. His head circumference is 20.5 inches. His chest is 20.75 inches. His waist is 27.4 inches. His right arm and left arm from the top of the joint down to his fingertips is 17 inches. His hands are 7 inches where the fabric changes to the fingertips. And then the right and left leg from the top of the joint is 21 inches. The sole of his feet each are 5.5 inches in length and 3 inches wide. He's got black wooden buttons for eyes that are 0.6 inches. His nose is 1.6 inches. His mouth is 2.25 inches across and 1.2 inches from top to bottom. His neck is 10.9 inches and his ears are 2.5 inches vertically, 1.5 inch wide. And his right ear was replaced. That was the one that would have the button, but it doesn't have that. That was likely restored in 2004, they think. And then the left ear is the original, but it had repair stitching. So he's a fairly big boy when you think about dolls.
Mm-hmm.
And they did make different sizes of him at the time, but the size that he was probably for display.
Right.
And they said that because of his size, that he would have to be bought by somebody that had money. So, he wasn't a cheap doll. He was pretty expensive for his time period. They don't have the specifics of how much he cost at the time, but you had to have money to have him.
You can buy a life-size replica of him from that museum, but it's $2,500. So you have to have money to even buy him now if you wanted to have your own Robert the doll in your house.
And see, I went for, and Robert, it's okay. We've already talked about this. There's Robert that I have, and he is not that large. However, he does have his own chair. So it's the same replica chair and everything. But yeah, he's miniature. In fact, he's probably smaller than the little lion that Robert carries with him in his case. But he does come from the museum. And I'm sure, Kevin, you have yours.
Still in the box.
Yeah, and they have to come from the museum. And it was kind of funny when I got him, because he didn't come with the chair. That came separately. That was a different buy. But I did buy the doll with the book, and it came with a postcard in it that's, picture of Robert's head and it says Robert did it, because that's like his thing. That's his little niche. But the book and the doll had a little note in there saying, we did ask Robert's permission for us to sell this to you, which I thought was kind of odd because I've never had that before. So it's like, okay, so you had to talk to him and ask him permission to sell all these things, which is kind of nice. I mean, you do, if there is an entity within Robert, you don't want to make him mad, but in the other case, you don't want to ask something that's evil permission. But
My
That's
wife wanted
funny.
mine kept in the garage, and I'm like, I don't think Robert would be all too pleased about being on the garage shelf. So on the desk he stays where he can hang out and listen. It's, it's just kind of funny. It's like, yeah, I'm not going to cross that path.
Well, he came in like this plastic, like carrying case type thing. So I kept him in there until I saw online because I follow the museum and I saw that they were selling the chairs. And I'm like, I think Robert would like to be sitting in a chair instead of this plastic bag.
Hmm.
Might be a little bit more appropriate, but and of course I put him in the chair. I'm like, okay, now we're sitting in the chair. We're good. You know, yeah, talking to a doll. I get it. It sounds weird, but you know what? This is one that you don't want to mess with at all. Um, Renee, do you know much about Robert?
Just what I started researching. I had heard inklings about Robert the Doll.
Mhm,
Um, and so I kind of deep dive into it after the last podcast session,
mhm,
and I watched the documentary on him, and it kind of there was a little feeling of creepiness, I want to say, and seeing how much he affected different people,
mhm.
and the letters that were written, to him. And so it's one of those things where, you know, I very much am along the lines of, okay, yeah, no, I'm asking permission for everything if, I ever come in contact with the doll.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the nice thing about this book too, that in fact, I'll read you, you talked about the letters. Okay. So they have letters in the book from people that have either visited Robert or talked about Robert. It was kind of interesting. So let me see if I can find one. Um, this one was from March 31st, 2010. It says, Dear Robert, I'm very sorry for not asking permission to take your picture while visiting the museum last week. Since I have taken your picture without permission, many strange things have happened to me. While driving back from the Keys, a deer ran out in front of our car. Okay, that doesn't sound too unheard of, but we had to swerve to avoid hitting it, and they ran off the road. They almost hit a tree. 2 days later, we had a small kitchen fire. Also, we've been hearing childlike giggles coming from our basement. Last night, I was home alone. I heard a voice coming from the basement. When I went to investigate, I tripped and fell down the bottom 3 stairs. I got up to run out, but the door was locked. My husband said I probably turned the lock myself without even thinking about it and locked myself in the basement. But honestly, Robert, we both know the truth. Please accept my deepest apologies for taking your picture without asking. Also, please accept my daughter's apology for sticking out her tongue at you and making fun of you. Sincerely, and then they have it blanked out and you can't see who sent it. So I thought that was kind of interesting because it's like they almost hit a tree, you know. And then they had the fire, and then they heard giggling, which a lot of people talk about, like giggling and stuff like that. So let me give you a little history about the place where Robert was made. Okay. This was an entrepreneur that from Germany in 1880. She was a seamstress. Her name was Marguerite Steve, who was confined to a wheelchair. She began making felt elephant pin cushions from a pattern that was published in a woman's magazine. And then she noticed that children enjoyed playing with them. So then she went on to design and create other popular animal-themed toys. A few years later, with assistance from her brother Fritz, she formed the Steve Company. Today, over a century and a quarter later, it's still universally recognized for its quality, workmanship, and fantastic designs. Although best known for their 1902 invention of the teddy bear, they also can take credit for the creation of Robert the Doll. But Robert didn't look like he does now. Robert actually was a clown. So people that don't like dolls really wouldn't have cared for him back then because, and I don't know if you guys are going to be able to see it. I'm trying to get you a picture here.
Hmm. No.
Not coming up. See, he doesn't want to be seen. Nope. Okay, you know what? You guys, I'll just, oh, there it is. Now you
Oh
guys can
wow.
see him.
Oh yeah, that's kind of creepy.
Yeah, he's kind of clown looking. So, and I'll put it on our Facebook page and everything. So he did not come in a sailor suit. He came in a clown suit. The sailor suit actually was jeans. And they talk about the suit itself, where he wears jeans suit, which makes sense. I mean, he's size of a little kid, so why not? He has, let me go to the thing. So he's wearing a 4-piece sailor suit consisting of pants, vest, jacket, and hat. The pants are sailor style with the white bell bottoms and a very slight yellowing from age, obviously. He's over 100 years old. And then they contain 10 buttons ascending the thigh to the doll's center waist. Traditional Navy pants have 13 buttons, so he's a little off. Slightly oversized, the pant legs are folded to a cuff right above each foot. No markings were found on the pants to identify the origin of it. The vest is decorative, covering only the front areas of the doll's chest, not concealed by his jacket. And it's white in color with a light blue anchor that's embroidered on the upper chest and 3 stripes with light blue piping below the neckline. So the fouled anchor references the anchor that has become hooked onto the ground, or it has a cable wound around the stock. And then there's no markings again to tell the origin of it. The jacket he wears is a white sailor jacket with light blue and red markings. The single red band circles right around the right arm, midway between the shoulder and the elbow. And that's a rating badge with a red eagle with an anchor atop 2 of the chevrons adorned on the left arm in the same location. So according to this, if you were to have Robert in the military, in the Navy, he would be an E5 petty officer, 2nd class.
Not bad.
Yeah. So, and then the hat itself is a white sailor hat with features a blue anchor on it with the right facing eagle. And the hat is made in accordance to all the materials that you would find in the U.S. government and the U.S. Naval specifics. So, and it's a size 7. So it looks like his hat is actually naval based. So he, he's a ranking officer, I guess, in some way, without having any experience, which is kind of cool. He wears jeans thing. I don't know how they got that, obviously mom and dad bought it for him, but why he picked a sailor suit, I mean, it's better than a clown. I don't know. So you guys know that he has a bed and breakfast down in Key West, right?
I did not know that.
No? It's known as the Artist House. Obviously, because Gene was an artist. But the one thing I found interesting was the museum that Robert is at. Gene had a part of that too. They display his artwork there. So, Debbie, how much do you know about Gene and Robert? Have you heard anything about them?
I've been thinking about Robert the doll the last couple of days and trying to debunk his haunted history,
Mm-hmm.
and I can't quite wrap my head around that this doll has all these powers to curse people if they don't ask permission to take his picture.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden these people have all this bad luck. Well, who's to say they wouldn't have had the bad luck even if they had asked for permission,
Right.
and I I just can't see a doll having that kind of power,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like, well, where did he get this power? He would have had to have known someone in the magic field to be able to have that kind of power. But sorry, Robert, but you are just a doll.
So with that, you're talking about how does he, have these powers? They do have a rumor. Did you hear about the rumor with the servants?
Yeah. The Bohemian.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
So there was a servant that there's a couple different rumors out there. So she was from the Bahamas, but so is, Jean's mom. She's from the Bahamas too. But they say that there was, let me go back. The servant was originally from the Bahamas, and they say that she presented Robert to Jean, and that it was stuffed with straw, which it is, and dressed in the sailor suit. But we know now that the sailor suit is actually Jean's. The face supposedly does resemble Robert Eugene's face. But there's the button eyes. So I mean, there's that. And then he was probably handmade by the servant, who then used voodoo on it to curse the doll. And then and this came from one of the documentaries that I saw, that there was an alleged affair between Jean's dad and the servant, and her name was Emmeline. And Emmeline, they said she had a child, and the child lived there with the family as well. But they say that Thomas had an affair with Emmeline, and they ended up having a baby together, and that was actually their love child. And because, this alleged affair, her daughter ended up dying and in the home. And after that, she put the curse on the doll and she did practice some voodoo and all that. So that's the other rumor. But then I've also seen things where the girl still lived until she was around, Jean's age. So it wasn't like she died at a very young age, like a baby or anything. But she did die at a younger age. Was it, like the Spanish flu or something like that? I don't know. They don't really talk much, or they didn't talk much about what her ailments were, just that she had died in the house. But those were some of the rumors, that it was a love affair between them, and the daughter was the result of this affair. And then it was said that she would see things, she would experience her, and there was a male servant, and they would see Robert actually getting up and doing things. Mrs. Otto, Jean's mother, would hear two voices in Jean's room, and she'd be like, okay, I told you to go to bed. Why are you still up? And who are you talking to? And she'd go in there, and it was just Jean and Robert. And he is like, well, Robert was talking to me. Because it didn't sound like Gene. It sounded like it was a two-way conversation. And then she had had enough of it after a while, and she ended up putting Robert in a closet. Like, I've had it, because his thing was Robert did it. Things would break. Robert did it. And so she just said, that's enough. It's not Robert. You're doing it, and you're blaming the doll. So she put Robert in a closet. Well, the male servant was doing dishes, late at night as everybody's getting ready for bed, and he heard some noises, and he thought it was one of the kids. So he goes out in the hall and he's looking, and up on the stairwell itself, on the first landing, is Robert, the doll, standing there. And then all of a sudden, Robert turns the corner and runs up the stairs. And of course, the servant's just like flabbergasted, like, how do I tell my bosses that this is what I saw, without getting some kind of repercussion of it? Because it sounds crazy. Who is going to really sit there and go, yeah, a doll. Yeah. Do you want to try another one? Oh, I'm sure you're going to sit there and say Robert did it too. Nobody's going to believe him. And so this went on and on and on. And his parents just kind of was like, had it. And Robert went everywhere with Gene. No matter where Gene went, Robert was there with him. It was his steady companion. They were best of friends. And if he was told to go outside, because, Gene doesn't want to go and socialize with anybody. And so when he goes outside, because mom and dad said, you have to go out and play with the other kids. Okay. And then he puts Robert up in the window so that Robert can see them playing. Yeah, as a parent, I'd be like, what are you doing? Why are you putting a doll in the window? This doll is not going to be, kids have imaginations. We all had, imaginations when we were kids, and that hasn't changed in over, 300, 400, 500 years. Kids play, and, they have their imaginary friends, and they have their dolls or whatever toys that they're really close to. But at a certain point, you're like, all right, put it away, go play with the kids, go get dirty. But no, Robert's got to watch. I don't know. What did you guys think of your kids were like, hey, I'm going to have, so-and-so in the window? Probably were like looking at the kid like, no, you're not.
No,
Yeah,
actually, I'd
maybe.
be really interested to see what he's doing. Find out what is he hearing? Who's he talking to? Actually have a conversation with that individual. Get answers.
Well, we're paranormal investigators, so we're kind of weird that way.
Yeah.
That's true.
Anybody else would be like, no, put it away.
Yeah, first couple of times you go with it. After the first couple of times, it'd be like, all right, what's up with this?
Right? What's underlying?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's not something that you're going to think about, like, okay, what are the neighbors thinking now? What are the other kids thinking, And like I said, people have problems with dolls as is. So, and the thing was back then, now you think of little boys playing with dolls and they're like, no, you're not playing with a doll. But back then it was actually kind of normal for the boys to play with the dolls.
Yep.
It's not something that was, abnormal at all. And so nobody really thought twice about giving a little boy a doll, especially you would think they would give the doll to his sister, but they didn't. And so Gene ended up growing up, and then he ended up moving out for a little while. And he was an artist and everything. He ended up, his grandfather, like I said, was a doctor, and then his father became a doctor. So when we think of doctors, we're thinking, okay, they come from a lot of money. But back then, the doctors didn't make money like they do nowadays. You think, oh, a doctor, they're 6-7 figure, physicians. But back then, they actually had to have a second or third job because the doctors back then made house calls. And if you went and you were sick, they weren't asking for money. They're there to help you and make you feel better. So they didn't ask for money. There was no billing of the insurance companies and all that other stuff. And, well, I'm busy. I'm going to have to schedule you out for another 6 months because I know you're sick and all, but I can't see you right now. I don't have business hours or office hours for, my patients on Fridays. And we only see patients on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Wednesday mornings, because after 12 o'clock on Wednesdays, I'm doing paperwork, and on Fridays, it's all office work. So we're closed. They didn't do that. It was, oh, you're sick? Okay, I'll be right over. Let me just grab my bag and I'll run over to your house. So his father ended up purchasing 2 drugstores. And that's what a lot of the doctors did back then, is they became pharmacists too. So his dad owned 2 drugstores. Well, in the drugstores, they also had paint supplies. So Eugene ended up getting his paint supplies at Dad's store. And that started it, where he started painting, was when he was a little kid, and he just kept going with it. Eventually, he went to college and all that stuff after he graduated high school. Do you guys know where he ended up going after he got done with college?
Oh, I can't remember.
You go to France?
Yes. Yeah. Do you know what he did in France when he was there? Do you remember?
Wasn't he studying under some big name artists that were in France?
Yes.
Right. He was like apprentice.
Yeah. And then when he got to France and he was studying under there, that's where he ended up meeting his wife, who, by the way, is not an artist in that sense. She was an artist as far as music went. She was a pianist. No, I did not say the other word. I said pianist, okay? Just clarifying that for all you people out there. Sick people, I'm telling you. So she was studying there in Paris, because that's where they met, was in Paris. And trying to find, her name is Annette Parker Otto. So they met in Paris. She was born in Cincinnati, Ohio, by the way. She was born on December 9th, 1902, to Gerard and Fanny Parker. And she spent most of her early years in New England. And then, she came from a wealthy family, and she was raised in a section of Boston known for its brownstone homes. She was the older of 2 children, so she had a sister who was younger than her. Her name was Lester. And she started studying the piano at the age of 5. And then she specialized in it and ended up going to Washington, D.C., where she played in the National Cathedral there. And then in 1939, she was interrupted in her lessons and her bow to society, and she ended up going to attend the Garland School of Homemaking. Yeah. What that school is? I thought this was kind of interesting. So homemaking. So back then, women had to go and they had to be refined. I would have a hard time doing that now, but that's just me. I'm sure my husband would be like, yeah, please send my wife. Finishing school of sorts. So their advertising is that they're a specialty school, which qualifies women to pretty much they're able to maintain a well-ordered home. So the school offers a 1 to 2 year homemaking course, which includes child study, family and social problems, food and its preparation, income and cost of living, furnishings, serving of meals, and hard work for children. I'll give you a handwork for a child here. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not saying to you back then they probably would have took a belt or two to some of those kids. That's not how we do things nowadays. It was basically a school that taught Anne how to be the perfect housewife. So the school appears to have played a defining role in her life because she had to decide, does she want to continue on with her passion of music, or does she want to dedicate her role to society and play, the socialite? So once she got done with the schooling, she ended up going to Europe, to pursue her music. And that's where she met Gene. And her and Gene, had a love whirlwind romance in Paris and everything. They ended up getting married. And then Gene's mother ended up getting sick. Gene's father had already passed away by this point. Okay. And so, his sister and his brothers had moved on, and that meant there was nobody there for the house. So they ended up moving back to Key West. Excuse me, I got like dry throat. So, they ended up going back to Key West and taking over the family home. And, the family home is quite beautiful. It is actually like I said, it's a bed and breakfast now, but it was built on 3 levels with the turret room being located in the uppermost floor, which ended up being Robert's room. This has a king-size bedroom that comes with a warning, by the way, that there is a ghost in the room. But it is not of Robert. It is a woman in a wedding dress that has been seen in the room at the top of the stairs, and she slowly descends before them before she disappears. So, I mean, this is like a big, huge house that they ended up, taking over. It's kind of like a Victorian. It's a mixed match of different things. It's Victorian and what else do they call it? It was, I have to find the thing. Key West, West Indian, colonial, Victorian mix match of sorts. And that's what they took over. It's quite a large home. 12-foot ceilings, sunroom, garden room, guest house, morning room, parlor suite, Eugene's study, Anne's suite, because they didn't live together once they got back to the house, by the way. The turret suite, and then people can see what it was like to live in the Otto home back in the day. The first floor has hallways the length of the first floor with the staircase close to the entrance. The parlor suite is to the left. This suite is served as the Otto's family parlor or living room. It was here that Anne's piano was played and guests were entertained. There's pocket doors that create an intimacy, and it can be open and closed to the adjoining library, now known as the garden room. There's a third room on the first level, which was Gene's study. And then there's the dining area adjoining his study and the hallway. And then there's the butler's pantry that was added at some point. And then the pantry is connected to the dining room, to the kitchen, and then originally it was separate for the cookhouse. And then the backyard, the Ottos had converted the one area into a pool. So now they have a pool there. The second floor of the house has 3 main rooms. The fourth room, the sunroom, has a private entry to the back garden stairs. Anne and Jean had separate rooms. Anne's suite is at the back of the house. Jean's was next to hers, now known as the morning room. The turret suite is found at the front of the house. The turret suite is significant for its magnificent turret, but also because it is a location where people claim to see Robert the Doll moving from window to window on his own. And the actual turret is on the 3rd floor and is only accessible through the 2nd floor suite, by the way, which is Anne's. So they had no children. When they got back to the house, they ended up, you know, doing normal things, parties, guests coming over, and then somehow, some way, they found Robert in the attic, and that started Jean and Robert's adventures again. And so then Jean created little furniture for Robert in his own room, because Robert needed to be by Jean all the time, and did not like Robert. She was not a fan at all. And she would hear little footsteps and, running around and, giggling and stuff like that. So, she unfortunately outlived Jean. And so she had to deal with Robert after Jean had passed away. And so then it turned into other things, as we'll talk about as well. But what do you guys think so far about Robert and Jean's relationship as child and goes into adulthood and married? And
A little creepy on the married side. I don't think I'd want a doll hanging out in my room.
you talk about that. It's actually what really set Anne off was that Jean said Robert had to be in their bedroom. That's kind of what set them apart and go, yeah, we're not sleeping in the same room anymore, because he would have Robert at the end of the bed just sitting up. And it's like, oh,
yeah, that's a deal breaker. That's a little much.
I mean, okay, so some people, they have their collections around them and stuff like that, but this is like taking it to the next level. Like, hey, buddy, you want to sit at the end of the bed and watch my wife and I sleep at night?
Yeah.
Debbie, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm not going to have a doll at the foot of my bed. I'll have a cat, but not a doll.
Well, and that's the thing. It's like, I'm used to my dogs being in the bed and everything is like, all right, fine, whatever. But a doll, like, I have a thing where I have to have the closets closed in my house, like in my bedroom. I have to have it closed. It's always a thing for me. I still have some stuffed animals from when I was a child up in my closet, but they're like way up in the closet area, like, because I don't want them to get ruined. Like when I talk about stuffed animals, I have like the original Gizmo when he came out, back in the day. Sandy from Annie, I've got him. And then when my dad ended up getting cancer, when I was a kid, I went to the gift shop and he was a big fan of Wile E. Coyote. And so I gave that to my dad when he was in the hospital. And when he died, I ended up taking that back home. So I keep those up in the closet because I don't want anything to happen to them. I don't want them to get into a tote and then get ruined somehow, some way, because, anything is possible. So I have a thing though that I'm like, I have to have that closed. I don't want things. I don't even know what's, yes, I'm a paranormal investigator, but there's certain things that I don't want my closets open, It's just a thing. I don't know. It's like, how many people sleep with their foot over the edge of the bed thinking that something's going to grab their foot, or something like that. It's kind of like my closet door is open and just like that little bit of a crack. And I'm like, no, I just need that close.
All the wonderful horror movies you watch as a kid, there's always something in the closet,
Right.
Same way here. It's like, yep, nope, that's gonna go. That's getting closed.
Yeah. So just having a doll at the end of your bed and he's just sitting there like staring at you as you're sleeping.
Yeah, that's
and he's the size of a child.
Right.
Dead
doll eyes.
Yeah. My kids have woken me up in the middle of the night and like,
I hate that.
because they're like standing on the side of the bed and they're just sitting there staring at me. I'm like,
Yeah,
Oh.
you just feel a presence.
I never thought of that effect. You know, you're
Oh, man.
sleeping with your wife and then you wake up, forget the doll's down, and you're like, whoa.
right. Ever have it where you have a pile of clothes in the corner? Like, doesn't matter if you were a kid or you're an adult, and you have that pile of clothes in the middle of the night, that thing turned into a demon. You're like, there's a person sitting right there, and you know that it's a pile of clothes, but in the middle of
Well,
the night, it doesn't
they're
look like that.
they're dirty clothes. There could be some demons in there.
That's true. They start getting up and walking on their own, you know that there's something going on. Anybody that has boys for teenagers, you know, some of those things are
You've
like
got demon
walking around.
piles of clothes.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yes. But to have something that actually looks like a child sitting there, I'm surprised she put up with it as long as she did. She's kind of a saint in my eyes, dealing with Gene and his shenanigans, you know, and it put some strain on them, obviously, where, you know, they weren't sleeping in the same rooms, and she was just like not really responding to him. You know, they would have their parties and everything, but she would get irritated because it would be like something with Robert that was involved. So I mean, they had dogs. They, like I said, they had their little terrier, their Yorkshire Terrier. But who's say she didn't get mad and like something happened to the dog, and here it was Robert, you know, doing something to the dog. I don't know.
Mm.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Wicked Darkness. I'm Kathy, your host. And for our skeptics, keep us grounded. And for our believers, keep believing. Have a good night.